1. The day after the funeral, the air still felt heavy. I could smell the lilies from the service on my coat as I walked into the lawyer's office. My sister Claire was already there. She sat straight in her chair like she owned the room. Her black dress was perfect, her hair neat, her face calm. I stood near the door for a moment before sitting down. My name is Venessa Stark, and in my family I was always the quiet one. Claire was the star. She ran meetings. She charmed investors. She spoke loudly and confidently about the future of our family company. I stayed behind the scenes. Our parents liked to say Claire was the leader of the next generation. They never said much about me. The lawyer cleared his throat. Papers rustled on the table. "This is the last will and testament of your father," he said. Claire folded her hands and smiled slightly, like she already knew what was coming. I expected very little. Maybe a small savings account. Maybe a few personal things. After all, Claire had spent years preparing to take over everything. The lawyer began reading. And within minutes, it became very clear that my expectations had been exactly right. 2. The primary residence is transferred to Claire Stark, the lawyer read. Claire nodded once, calm and confident. The investment accounts are transferred to Claire Stark. Another nod. The manufacturing company, Stark Industrial Holdings, is transferred in full to Claire Stark. Claire's smile widened. No one in the room looked surprised. Not the lawyer. Not the family advisor sitting near the window. And not me. Claire had always been the golden child. She spoke at business events with our father. She attended meetings with investors. She walked through the factory like she already owned the place. Meanwhile, I handled spreadsheets and paperwork. Operational bank reserves and investment portfolios are transferred to Claire Stark, the lawyer continued. Claire leaned back in her chair. I stared at the wooden table. It felt strange hearing the full list out loud. The house, the business, the savings, the company vehicles, everything. Claire glanced at me. "Venessa always preferred her quiet life," she said lightly. The lawyer turned a page. "There is one final item." Claire sighed softly, like the meeting was almost over. That was when the lawyer said something none of us expected. 3. Your father also owned a smaller entity called Northridge Holdings, the lawyer said. Claire frowned slightly. That company is transferred to Venessa Stark. I blinked. For a moment, I thought I had heard wrong. Claire looked confused. "What exactly is Northridge Holdings?" she asked. The lawyer checked the file. "It appears to be a small holding company that manages several operational licenses connected to the main business." Claire laughed. "A paperwork company?" The lawyer nodded. "Essentially." Claire leaned back again. "Well, Venessa always liked paperwork." The room chuckled politely. I didn't say anything. The lawyer slid a thin folder across the table toward me. "That concludes the will." Claire stood up quickly. "Well," she said brightly, "I guess we have a lot of work ahead of us." She looked at me with a friendly smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Enjoy your little company." I opened the folder slowly. Inside were several documents, contracts, licensing agreements, and a letter written in my father's careful handwriting. My heart started beating faster, because suddenly I remembered a conversation from years earlier, a quiet talk in his office that I had never fully understood until now. 3 years earlier, my father had called me into his office late one evening. The factory floor was already quiet. Claire had left hours before after leading a long meeting. I expected my father to ask about some reports. Instead, he handed me a stack of contracts. "Read these carefully," he said. I sat down and studied the pages. They were complicated. Distribution rights, operating licenses, supply agreements. "Do you understand how the company actually works?" he asked. "I think so," I said carefully. He shook his head. "No, you understand the numbers, but not the system." Over the next few months, he started teaching me things he had never explained before. Not the flashy parts Claire loved, the hidden structure, the legal agreements, the small companies behind the big company. One evening I asked him a simple question. "Why are you showing me all this?" He smiled slightly. "Because the person who understands the system holds the real power." At the time, I thought it was just another lesson. Now, sitting in the lawyer's office with that folder in my hands, I realized it had been something much more important. 5. Claire didn't stay long after the meeting ended. She had calls to make, investors to reassure, announcements to prepare. The future owner of Stark Industrial Holdings had a busy schedule. I walked outside into the cold afternoon air. The sky was gray, and the streets felt quiet. I sat in my car and opened the folder again. The letter from my father rested on top. I unfolded it slowly. "Venessa," it began. I know this may seem like a small thing compared to what Claire received, but sometimes the smallest pieces hold the most weight. My heart pounded as I kept reading. Northridge Holdings manages the operating licenses for Stark Industrial. Every factory permit, every supply agreement, every distribution contract flows through that company. I stopped breathing for a moment. Without those licenses, the letter continued, the company cannot legally operate. The page trembled in my hands. Dad had given Claire the empire, but he had given me the system that allowed the empire to exist. And Claire had just laughed at it. She had no idea what my father had really left behind. 6. The first week after the will reading passed quietly. Claire moved quickly. She loved momentum. Within days, she was holding meetings at the company headquarters, speaking to department heads, and telling everyone that the future of Stark Industrial was bright. I stayed away. I worked from home, reading every page in the Northridge Holdings folder. Dad had organized everything carefully. Every operating license for our factories had been issued under Northridge Holdings. The permits for the equipment, the safety approvals, even the environmental registrations, all of them were connected to the small company now listed under my name. The main business Claire inherited did not technically run the factories. Northridge did. I stared at the documents late into the night. Dad had not hidden anything. The information had always been there. But most people never looked closely enough. Claire certainly hadn't. A few days later, she called me. Her voice was cheerful. "Venessa, I'm organizing a leadership meeting next week," she said. "It would look nice if you came." I could almost hear the polite smile in her voice. The board should see the family united. The boardroom looked exactly the same as it always had. Long table, tall windows, the city skyline beyond the glass. I sat near the end of the table while Claire stood at the front. She looked confident, wearing a tailored jacket and speaking clearly as she walked through her presentation. "Stark Industrial will continue expanding our distribution network," she said. The board members nodded. Claire had always been good at this part. She talked about growth, leadership, and opportunity. No one asked about the licenses. No one asked about Northridge Holdings. Why would they? To most people it was just a small administrative company. After the meeting, Claire approached me. "You didn't say much," she said lightly. "I didn't need to." She glanced down at the folder I had brought. "You still looking at those paperwork companies Dad left behind?" "Yes." She laughed softly. "You always liked the quiet side of things." Then she added something that made me pause. "By the way, our legal team is reviewing all operating contracts next week." I nodded calmly. "That sounds like a good idea." Claire smiled and walked away. But for the first time since the will reading, I noticed something small. One of the company lawyers looked confused as he flipped through a thick stack of documents. 8. 3 weeks later, Claire called again. This time her voice sounded different. Tighter. "Venessa, I need to ask you something," she said. "What is it?" "Our legal team is reviewing the factory operating licenses." I stayed quiet, and they noticed something strange. My father had once told me silence made people talk more. Claire continued. "They said many of the licenses aren't under Stark Industrial." "No," I said calmly. "They're under a company called Northridge Holdings." "That's correct." There was a pause on the line. A long one. Claire spoke again, slower this time. "Why would Dad structure it that way? He always said it was better to separate operational rights from ownership." Another pause. "So what does that mean exactly?" she asked. I looked at the folder on my desk. "It means Northridge holds the operating licenses. And I own Northridge." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything we had said. 9. Claire arrived at my apartment the next morning. She didn't call first. When I opened the door, she was already speaking. "Our legal team is overthinking this," she said as she walked inside. She placed a folder on the table. They say the company cannot legally run the factories unless Northridge authorizes the licenses. I sat down across from her. That's correct. Claire waved her hand dismissively. Then just transfer the company back to Stark Industrial. Her tone sounded casual, like she was asking me to pass the salt. I folded my hands. Northridge doesn't belong to Stark Industrial. It belongs to me. Claire leaned forward. Venessa, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. She opened the folder and pointed to several pages. Our contracts with suppliers reference these licenses. Yes. And the distribution agreements do too. Yes. Claire stared at me. Are you telling me the entire company depends on a holding company you own? I met her eyes calmly. Yes. For the first time in our lives, my sister looked unsure. 10. Claire left my apartment without saying much. But 2 days later, the phone calls began. First it was the company's legal department, then the operations director, then a board member. They all asked the same question in different ways. Can Northridge confirm the operating licenses? I answered carefully. Yes, the licenses are active, but I never transferred anything. The truth was simple. Without Northridge approving the licenses each year, the factories could not legally produce anything. No production meant no shipments. No shipments meant no revenue. Claire finally called again that evening. Her voice was no longer friendly. Venessa, we need to resolve this immediately. What exactly needs resolving? You know what I mean. I waited. You need to transfer Northridge to the main company. I looked at the letter Dad had written me. The will says Northridge belongs to me. Claire's tone hardened. Then we'll have to fix that mistake. I closed my eyes for a moment, because I already knew something she didn't. Dad had not made a mistake. He had built the system this way on purpose, and the system was working exactly as he planned. 11. Claire's next move came faster than I expected. 3 days after our last call, I received an email from the company's legal office asking me to attend a clarification meeting. The message sounded polite, but I knew what it really meant. Claire wanted control back. The meeting took place in the same boardroom where she had given her confidence speech weeks earlier. This time, the mood felt different. 5 board members sat around the table. Their folders were thick with documents. Claire stood at the head of the room again, but her smile looked tight. Thank you for coming, Venessa, she said. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. We've been reviewing the corporate structure of Stark Industrial, he began. He slid a diagram across the table. It showed 3 boxes, Stark Industrial Holdings at the top, several factories underneath, and beside them, a small box labeled Northridge Holdings. All operational licenses run through this entity, the lawyer explained. Everyone looked at me. Claire spoke calmly. So we just need Venessa to transfer the licenses to Stark Industrial. I folded my hands. That isn't how the agreements work. The lawyer frowned slightly. What do you mean? Northridge doesn't transfer licenses, I said quietly. It grants operating rights. The room fell silent, because those 2 things were not the same. And suddenly, everyone understood the difference. 12 of the board members began asking questions quickly after that. Are you saying Stark Industrial cannot operate without your company's approval? One of them asked. I nodded once. That's exactly what I'm saying. Claire leaned forward. This structure is ridiculous, she said sharply. It must have been temporary. It wasn't, I replied. The lawyer flipped through more papers. These agreements were written 12 years ago, he said slowly. Your father signed them personally. Claire turned to him. Then we rewrite them. The lawyer shook his head. They're binding contracts. I spoke again. And most of them renew automatically through Northridge. Claire stared at me. You knew about this, she said. Yes. For how long? About 3 years. The room grew very quiet. One of the board members spoke carefully. So if Northridge decided not to renew operating rights, production would stop. Yes, I said. Claire stood up suddenly. This is insane. But the lawyer didn't argue. Instead, he said something that made everyone uneasy. Technically, Venessa Stark now holds operational authority over Stark Industrial. Claire slowly turned. 13. After the meeting ended, Claire followed me into the hallway. Stop walking, she said. I turned around. Her calm mask was gone. You planned this, she said. No. You knew about the structure. Yes. And you never told me. You never asked. Her jaw tightened. This company belongs to me. You own it, I said. But owning something and running it are different things. Claire stepped closer. Dad would never have wanted this situation. Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she crossed her arms. What do you want, Venessa? It was the first honest question she had asked me in years. I shook my head. This isn't about what I want. Then what is it about? I looked through the glass wall into the boardroom. The directors were still talking, their voices tense. It's about understanding how the company works, I said. Claire gave a short laugh. I've been preparing to run this company my entire life. Yes, I said. But Dad prepared someone to protect it. Her eyes narrowed. And that someone is you. I didn't answer. But the silence said enough. 14 The pressure started building after that meeting. First it came from the board, then from senior managers. They didn't threaten me. Not directly. But every phone call carried the same message. The company needed stability. A week later, Claire invited me to dinner. We hadn't eaten together alone in years. The restaurant was quiet and expensive. The kind of place she liked. Claire looked calm again, like she had practiced before arriving. We're sisters, she said once the food arrived. Yes. We shouldn't be fighting over paperwork. It isn't paperwork. She ignored that. I'm willing to be fair, she continued. Fair how? I'll buy North Ridge from you. I took a sip of water. How much? 5 million. I almost smiled. Claire misunderstood my reaction. That's generous, she said. North Ridge doesn't even produce anything. I leaned forward slightly. You're right. It doesn't produce anything. But it allows everything else to. Claire's expression hardened. You're being difficult. No, I said calmly. I'm being careful. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said quietly, You're enjoying this. That surprised me. Because the truth was the opposite. I wasn't enjoying it at all. 15 The real problem appeared 2 weeks later. I received an email from the company's compliance office early Monday morning. Subject: License renewal deadline. I opened the message slowly. Several factory operating permits were scheduled for annual renewal within 10 days. Normally, this was routine. North Ridge Holdings simply confirmed authorization, and the factories continued running. But this year was different, because the board wanted control back first. Claire called me an hour later. You saw the email, she said. Yes. Then you know the factories need license confirmation. Yes. So send the authorization. I stayed quiet. Claire's voice became colder. You're not actually thinking of delaying it, are you? Not delaying, I said carefully. Reviewing. Reviewing what? The agreements. Claire exhaled sharply. Venessa, if those licenses expire, production stops. I'm aware. And if production stops, we lose millions. I'm aware of that too. There was a long pause. Then Claire spoke again. What do you want in exchange? The question hung between us. 4 years, Claire had held all the power in our family. Now she was asking for terms. And I finally understood the real lesson Dad had tried to teach me. Power doesn't come from owning everything. It comes from understanding what everything depends on. 16 For the next 2 days, I didn't answer Claire's question. I reviewed every contract again. Every license. Every supply agreement. Dad had organized them perfectly. North Ridge didn't just approve factory operations. It also authorized distribution permits in 3 countries. Without those approvals, trucks could not legally transport Stark industrial products across certain borders. The system was stronger than I realized. Claire called again on the 3rd day. Venessa, the board is getting nervous. That makes sense. We need the license renewal signed. I know. Then what are you waiting for? I thought about the past. Years of family dinners where Claire spoke while I stayed quiet. Years of people praising her leadership. And years of Dad quietly teaching me things no one noticed. I want one thing, I said. What? Respect for the structure Dad built. Claire sounded impatient. What does that even mean? It means North Ridge stays independent. No, she said immediately. Then the licenses remain under review. Her voice dropped. You're risking the entire company. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting it. Because if Dad had trusted me with the system, Then I intended to guard it properly. 17. The board scheduled an emergency meeting 2 days later. When I walked into the building, the atmosphere felt tense. Everyone knew production deadlines were approaching. Claire was already inside the boardroom when I arrived. Her expression was serious. The chairman of the board spoke first. "Venessa, we need clarity." I nodded. "The operating licenses will remain active." A few people sighed with relief. "But," I continued, "North Ridge will continue to manage them." Claire interrupted. "That arrangement gives Venessa full control over our production." "Operational control," I corrected. The chairman looked between us. "What exactly are you proposing?" I slid a document across the table. "A partnership agreement." Claire frowned. "What kind of partnership?" "Stark Industrial owns the factories and business assets," I explained. "North Ridge manages operating rights." "That's already happening," Claire said. "Yes," I replied. "But this agreement makes it official." The lawyer studied the paper. "This gives North Ridge permanent oversight authority." "Correct." Claire leaned back in her chair. "You're asking the board to accept you as a permanent power in the company." "No," I said. "I'm asking them to recognize the structure Dad already built." The room went quiet again. Because everyone knew one thing. The company couldn't run without those licenses. 18. The board asked for time to review the proposal. Claire did not. She cornered me outside the elevator. "You're blackmailing the company," she said quietly. "No. You're forcing the board into accepting your authority. I'm protecting the system Dad created." Claire shook her head. "You were never interested in running the business before." "That's not true." "You avoided the spotlight." "Yes. That's the same thing." "No," I said. "It's different." Claire looked confused. "Why?" "Because someone has to watch the parts no one else sees." For a moment she didn't respond. Then she asked something unexpected. "Did Dad plan this?" I answered honestly. "I think he planned balance." Claire gave a small bitter laugh. "Well, congratulations. You finally have power." Her words stayed in my mind long after she walked away. Because I didn't feel powerful. I felt responsible. Dad hadn't handed me control for revenge. He had given me something much heavier. The job of protecting the company, even from the people who thought they owned it. 3 days passed before the board called us back. This time the room felt calmer. The chairman spoke carefully. "We've reviewed Venessa's proposal." Claire crossed her arms. "And the structure already exists," he said. "North Ridge controls operational licenses." The lawyer nodded beside him. "And transferring them would require rewriting dozens of international agreements." Claire sighed. "So the board is giving up?" "No," the chairman said. "We're accepting reality." He looked at me. "North Ridge will remain the operating authority." Claire looked stunned. "But Stark Industrial owns the company." "Yes," the chairman said. "But Venessa controls the system that runs it." The lawyer added something important. "This arrangement may actually protect the company." Claire frowned. "How?" "If Stark Industrial faces legal or financial problems one day, North Ridge keeps the operating licenses separate." The board members nodded slowly. Claire stared at the table. Then she looked at me. "You win," she said quietly. I shook my head. This was never about winning. But Claire didn't look convinced. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one in control of everything. 20 that night, I sat alone in my apartment with Dad's letter in my hands again. I had read it many times already, but one line stood out more now. "The person who understands the system holds the real power." For years, Claire believed power came from ownership, from titles, from leadership positions. Dad believed something else. He believed systems mattered more than appearances. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Claire. I hesitated before answering. Her voice sounded tired. "The board accepted your agreement." "Yes." "So North Ridge stays separate." "Yes." Another pause. "You know what this means," she said. "What?" "I can't run the company without working with you." "That's true." She exhaled slowly. "I guess Dad made sure we needed each other." I thought about that. 4 years we had moved in opposite directions. Claire chasing control. Me studying the foundation underneath everything. Now both pieces had to work together. Maybe that had been Dad's real plan all along. Balance. 21. The next few months changed the way the company worked. Claire still ran Stark Industrial. She handled investors, strategy, and public announcements. That was always her strength. But every major operational decision now passed through Northridge, which meant it passed through me. At first, the staff seemed confused. They didn't know who truly had authority. Claire solved that quickly. During a leadership meeting, she stood up and said something surprising. From now on, operational licensing and system approvals will be handled by Venessa. The room looked at me. Claire continued. She understands the company's foundation better than anyone. It was the first time she had ever said something like that in public. After the meeting, I asked her why. She shrugged slightly. Because it's true. I didn't know how to respond. Our relationship had always been simple before. Claire led. I stayed quiet. Now things were different. Not friendly, but different. For the first time, we were actually working together. And the company was stronger because of it. 22. One afternoon, about 6 months later, Claire knocked on my office door. Northridge had moved into a small floor inside the Stark Industrial Building. It was quiet there, exactly how I liked it. Claire stepped inside and sat down. I've been reviewing the quarterly numbers, she said. They look strong. They do, I agreed. She leaned back in the chair. You know something funny? What? I spent 10 years thinking leadership meant standing at the front. And now, she smiled slightly. Now I realize half the company runs in places no one sees. I thought about Dad again. That's how systems work. Claire nodded slowly. Then she asked something unexpected. Did you ever know he planned it this way? No. But you understood it. Yes. She laughed softly. I guess I was too busy chasing the spotlight. You were good at it. That's not the same as understanding everything. For the first time, the conversation felt honest. Not like rivals. More like partners. 23. A year after Dad's death, the company held a memorial event in the factory courtyard. Employees gathered around the old brick building where Stark Industrial first began. Claire gave a speech. She spoke about Dad's vision and his leadership. Then she surprised everyone again. There's one more thing I want to say, she told the crowd. She gestured toward me. My sister Venessa helped protect this company in ways many people never see. Hundreds of employees turned to look. Claire continued. Our father believed the strongest companies are built on systems, not just leaders. Her words echoed across the courtyard. And Venessa understands those systems better than anyone. I stood there quietly, unsure what to say. After the speech ended, Claire walked over to me. You look uncomfortable, she said. I don't like attention. I know. She smiled. But sometimes people deserve credit. I glanced toward the factory buildings. Machines humming. 24. Later that evening, Claire and I walked through Dad's old office. The room had been left almost exactly the same. His desk, the wooden shelves, the framed factory photos. Claire picked up one of his notebooks. You know, she said. I used to think he trusted me more. I looked at her. He did trust you. With the Empire? Yes. Claire placed the notebook back on the desk. And he trusted you with the engine. That was a good way to describe it. The Empire looked powerful from the outside, but the engine kept it moving. Claire turned toward me. I used to think inheritance was about who got the most. I nodded slowly. A lot of people think that. But Dad wasn't dividing money, she said. He was dividing responsibility. The idea settled quietly between us. 4 years, we had misunderstood his final decision. Claire received the public power. I received the hidden structure. Together, they formed the complete system. Exactly as he planned. 25. Sometimes, people ask how the story ended. They expect a dramatic battle. A courtroom fight. A sisterly rivalry that destroys the company. But that's not what happened. The truth is much simpler. Claire runs Stark Industrial. I run Northridge Holdings. Every year, the operating licenses renew. Every year, the factories keep working. And every year, the company grows stronger. We still argue sometimes. That probably won't ever change. Claire still moves fast. I still prefer quiet analysis. But the balance works. Because the system demands it. Before he died, Dad once told me something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said power isn't about owning everything. It's about knowing which piece makes everything else possible. Claire inherited the Empire. the buildings, the money, the public title. But Dad left me something different. The key that makes the empire run. And once you understand the system, you realize something important. The person who holds the key was never the quiet one after all. Workers moving. All of it still running. Because the system held together. Exactly the way Dad designed it.